Good day, GraceKeepers, and welcome back to another Soul to Soul here on RelateNation. I'm Joe, and I'll be your host for this Bible Super Study. Last week, we journeyed through Exodus, witnessing the Israelites' dramatic escape from Egypt, led by Moses and guided by God's hand. Today, we open the book of Leviticus, a book often perceived as a shift from narrative to law, but in fact deeply interconnected with its predecessors. While Genesis introduced us to the chosen family, and Exodus narrated their liberation and covenant formation, Leviticus presents the next step in their journey, living as a holy community in the presence of a holy God. Leviticus stands as a bridge between the Israelites' past and their future. It answers the pressing question, how do a redeemed people live in close relationship with a holy God? This book, centered on the Tabernacle, which was meticulously described at the end of Exodus, becomes the focal point of worship and communion with God. In Leviticus, we transition from the grand narrative of salvation and freedom to the details of daily living and worship. This book is not just a list of laws, it's an invitation to understand the heart of God, His holiness, His desire for His people to be set apart, and His provisions for their shortcomings. As we delve into Leviticus, remember that it's part of a larger story. The laws and rituals, which might seem distant at first glance, are in fact deeply connected to the narrative of a God who desires to dwell among His people and guide them toward a life of holiness and purity. In the wilderness, as the Israelites encamp around the sacred tabernacle, a divine voice speaks to Moses, delivering laws that would define their existence. This story unfolds as a journey of understanding God's holiness and the sacred rituals upholding it. The narrative starts with the detailed rituals of offerings. The Israelites, in obedience, bring their sacrifices. The burnt offerings, a symbol of total surrender to God, involve various animals, each signifying the offerer's devotion. The grain offerings, embodying thanksgiving, are a humble presentation of the fruits of their labor. As these offerings are made, the tabernacle stands as a symbol of God's presence. In a significant ceremony, Aaron and his sons are consecrated as priests, donning sacred garments and preparing to serve as mediators between God and His people. The story then delves into the laws of purity. Chapters 11 to 15 detail the distinction between clean and unclean, from dietary laws to regulations on personal hygiene and health. These laws remind the Israelites of the need for purity in their daily lives. A solemn moment in the narrative is the Day of Atonement. On this sacred day, the high priest, carrying the nation's sins, enters the Holy of Holies, performing rituals of atonement and purification, a profound expression of the community's need for forgiveness and, of course, God's mercy. The narrative culminates with the Holiness Code, a divine guide to living a life set apart. These chapters encompass moral conduct, justice, and mercy, with the year of Jubilee symbolizing restoration and liberation, echoing principles of equality and compassion. Through these chapters, from the sacrificial laws to the Holiness Code, the Israelites learn about the nature of God's holiness and their sacred duty to reflect it in their lives. These laws and rituals, celebrations, and solemn assemblies shape them into a community distinct and set apart, called to mirror the holiness of their God. In the opening chapters of Leviticus, we are introduced to the heart of the book, the sacrificial system. This system, detailed from chapter 1 to 7, is not merely a set of rituals. It's a vivid expression of the Israelites' relationship with God, encompassing various offerings, each with a unique significance. The burnt offerings are the first we encounter. These are voluntary acts of worship, representing total surrender to God. The Israelites would bring animals, a bull, sheep, goat, or even a bird, depending on their means. These offerings were completely burnt on the altar, symbolizing the offerer's complete devotion and commitment to God. The aroma of the burnt offering was said to be pleasing to the Lord, signifying God's acceptance of the sacrifice. Next are the grain offerings. These were unique as they were not animal-based, but made of fine flour, olive oil, and frankincense. Grain offerings were a sign of gratitude and dedication to God, often accompanying burnt offerings. A portion was burnt on the altar, while the rest was given to the priests, symbolizing God's provision for both the priests and the offerer. Peace offerings were special, as they symbolized fellowship and peace with God. These offerings included animals from the herd or flock, and were a shared meal between the offerer, the priests, and God. They celebrated peace and reconciliation and could be offered as a thanksgiving gesture, a vow, or voluntarily. Sin offerings were crucial for atoning unintentional sins and ritual impurities. Different animals were used depending on the social status of the sinner, from a high priest to a common individual. These offerings emphasized the seriousness of sin and the need for atonement, reflecting the holiness of God and the importance of maintaining purity in the community. Lastly, guilt offerings dealt with offenses against God and the community, particularly in matters of property or trust. These offerings included a ram and required the offender to make restitution, adding a fifth of the value to it. It was about making amends and restoring relationships. In these chapters, we see a God who is holy and just, yet compassionate and approachable. The sacrificial system, laid out in Leviticus, provides a way for the Israelites to maintain their relationship with God, dealing with sin and expressing their devotion and gratitude. It's a system that underscores the need for atonement and the importance of living a life in alignment with God's holiness. In Leviticus, chapters 11 to 15, the narrative transitions to a distinct yet equally important aspect of the Israelites' life under God's law, the purity laws. These chapters delve into what is considered clean and unclean, encompassing various aspects of daily life. Far from being mere ancient health codes, these laws carry deep spiritual symbolism and significance. Chapter 11 presents the dietary laws, distinguishing between clean and unclean animals. This includes specific instruction on which land animals, sea creatures, birds, and even insects are permissible to eat. These laws were not just about diet, but symbolized discernment and obedience to God's commands. By following these dietary rules, the Israelites were physically and spiritually separating themselves from the surrounding nations, reflecting their unique covenant with God. In chapter 12, the focus shifts to the laws regarding childbirth. After giving birth, a woman goes through a period of purification. This period varies depending on the sex of the child. These laws underscore the value of life and the need for purification, even in natural processes, reminding the community of the sanctity of life and the omnipresence of holiness in all aspects of human existence. Chapters 13 and 14 address skin diseases, often referred to as leprosy in the biblical text, though covering a wider range of skin ailments. These chapters detail the procedures for diagnosis and purification. The priests played a crucial role, examining affected individuals and declaring them clean or unclean. These laws highlight the importance of health, community welfare, and the deeper implications of purity, both physical and spiritual. Chapter 15 discusses bodily discharges in both men and women. Like the other purity laws, these regulations are not merely about physical health. They symbolize the ever-present need for purity in the Israelites' daily lives. Observance of these laws was a practical way of demonstrating one's commitment to living according to God's standards. In these chapters, the purity laws serve as a constant reminder to the Israelites of the presence of God in every aspect of life, and the necessity of maintaining purity to remain in communion with Him. These laws, while specific to their time and context, communicate a timeless message about the importance of holiness, health, and the respect for the natural order as set by God. Chapter 16 of Leviticus marks one of the most solemn and significant moments in the Israelite calendar, the Day of Atonement, also known as Yom Kippur. This day stands as a profound testament to the concepts of sin, atonement, and God's mercy. On the Day of Atonement, the high priest assumes a central role. He performs a series of rituals that symbolize the mediation between a holy God and a sinful people. The high priest, adorned in special garments, first offers a bull as a sin offering for himself and his household, acknowledging that even the spiritual leaders of Israel are in need of atonement. One of the most unique rituals of the Day of Atonement involves 2 goats. One goat is sacrificed as a sin offering for the people. The other, known as the scapegoat, is sent into the wilderness after the high priest lays his hands on it, symbolically transferring the sins of the people onto the goat. This act vividly illustrates the removal of the nation's sins carried away into the wilderness. Perhaps the most awe-inspiring aspect of this day is when the high priest enters the Holy of Holies, the most sacred space within the Tabernacle, where the Ark of the Covenant resides. This is the only day in the year when anyone is permitted to enter this holy space, signifying a direct and intimate encounter with God. Here, the high priest sprinkles the blood of the sacrifices, making atonement for himself and the people. The Day of Atonement is also a day of solemn humility and repentance for the entire Israelite community. It's a day dedicated to self-denial, reflection on one's sins, and the seeking of God's forgiveness. It underscores the gravity of sin and the need for each individual to seek reconciliation with God. This chapter in Leviticus presents the Day of Atonement as a powerful symbol of God's desire to dwell amongst His people and to provide a means for their sins to be atoned. It illustrates the seriousness with which God views sin and His profound mercy in providing a path to forgiveness and restoration. The concluding chapters of Leviticus, 17 through 27, present the Holiness Code, a comprehensive guide that calls the Israelites to a standard of living that reflects God's holiness. This section transcends mere ritual purity and delves into the essence of holiness in daily life, shaping the moral and ethical fabric of the Israelite community. The Holiness Code encompasses various aspects of life, extending holiness beyond the tabernacle to every corner of personal and communal living. It addresses how the Israelites are to conduct themselves in relationships, in business dealings, and in their worship practices. The underlying message is clear. Every aspect of life is an arena for expressing devotion to God. These chapters are rich with moral and ethical instructions. They include laws about justice, such as fair treatment of others, prohibitions against deception, and commands to love one's neighbor. These laws underscore a community-based integrity, fairness, and compassion. Among the most striking concepts in the Holiness Code is the year of Jubilee, described in Leviticus 25. Every 50 years, the Israelites were to proclaim liberty throughout the land. Debts would be forgiven, slaves freed, and land returned to its original owners. This revolutionary idea was a radical realignment of society, ensuring that inequalities and injustices did not become entrenched. It reflects God's heart for justice and His desire for a community where liberty and restoration are central. In addition to moral and social laws, the Holiness Code also reiterates the importance of ritual and worship practices. It reinforces the principles of sacrifice, the observance of festivals, and the maintenance of purity in worship. These practices were not mere rituals, but expressions of a life lived in reverence to a holy God. In these chapters, Leviticus culminates with a powerful message. Holiness is not just about individual acts of piety, but about embodying the character of God in every aspect of life. It presents a vision of community, living in harmony with each other and with God, where justice, mercy, and holiness are all intertwined. Thank you for joining us on this journey through Leviticus. If you found value in this exploration, please show your support by liking this video, sharing it, and don't forget to subscribe. Your engagement means the world to me, and it keeps this journey thriving. A heartfelt thank you for being here and for walking this path of discovery with us. Your company makes each step of this journey enriching. Now get ready, because next week we'll be diving into the book of Numbers. It's a blend of narrative and law, providing insights into the Israelites' journey to the Promised Land. So make sure to come back next week as we continue unraveling the wisdom and lessons from these texts. Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking the truths that bind us all. Thank you again for being a part of this community. Stay blessed, and I'll see you in the next chapter of our journey. Peace and blessings.